Luis Alfredo Garavito, known as the Beast, is a name that remains etched in the history of Colombia and the entire world as a synonym for absolute evil, a being who walked among men but whose soul was completely engulfed in darkness. His story, woven with violence, manipulation, and unfathomable suffering, is one of the most macabre ever recorded in the annals of crime. The birth of a shadow. On January 25, 1957, Luis Alfredo Garavito was born in the small town of Genova, Quindio, in the heart of Colombia's coffee region. His life began marked by poverty and a dysfunctional family where violence brewed behind closed doors. His father, an alcoholic and abusive man, constantly mistreated his wife and children. His mother, trapped in a submissive and violent relationship, was powerless to escape the abuse she endured. From a young age, Garavito witnessed this brutality, leaving an indelible wound on his soul that would never heal. The physical and emotional abuse he experienced during childhood became the cornerstone of what would later lead to a life of inflicting suffering on others. The boy who saw his mother beaten and his father consumed by addiction grew up without a moral compass, lost in a world seemingly made of shadows and screams. Instead of a home filled with love, Luis Alfredo found an emotional prison that would shape his future. The transformation into the Beast. As he grew older, Garavito began to show signs of a dark nature. He became a withdrawn young man, not out of shyness but driven by a deep emptiness, a desire for vengeance and control. In his early adulthood, he left his hometown, searching for ways to fulfill his darkest desires. At first, society viewed him as an ordinary man. His mask was flawless. Luis Alfredo blended into the crowd, neither disheveled nor overtly suspicious. He moved through life like a ghost, always one step behind, always invisible. He earned the trust of those around him, but his true face only revealed itself in the shadows. During the 1990s, Garavito began roaming the streets of various Colombian cities, particularly those in marginalized areas. It was then that he started committing his first crimes, though no one suspected what was happening. He used his guise as a beggar or helpless individual to approach children wandering the streets. His strategy was simple yet deadly effective. He lured them with promises of candy, money, or toys, quickly earning the trust of his victims. The children, vulnerable and unsuspecting, never imagined the man who treated them with kindness could be a monster. The victims lament. His modus operandi was systematic and cold. Garavito did not simply kill, he ensured that his victims suffered before their deaths. He would take the children to isolated places where society's gaze could not reach, desolate parks, rural areas, or seemingly innocent locations. The children fell into his trap without realizing it. Once isolated, Garavito stripped his victims of their humanity. He physically and emotionally tortured them, inflicting unspeakable injuries before killing them. The suffering of his victims was prolonged, and their deaths were the culmination of a storm of terror that Garavito meticulously orchestrated. In many cases, the children were strangled, stabbed, or killed in ways so cruel that investigators were left stunned upon discovering their bodies. What most baffled investigators when Garavito was finally captured was not just the scale of his crimes but the meticulousness with which he carried them out. The man who had murdered more than 140 children did not appear to be a killer at first glance. For years, he eluded the police, hiding the traces of his actions, burying his victims in remote places, or disposing of their bodies in such chaotic circumstances that it seemed he could always disappear without leaving a trail. Garavito seemed to revel in the control he exerted over his victims. He did not just take lives but performed a macabre dance of power that gave him a sense of supremacy over those who could not defend themselves. The hunt for the monster. For years, the monster remained in the shadows. However, as always, lies and darkness cannot last forever. In 1999, thanks to a series of scattered clues, the police finally managed to capture Garavito. His arrest struck Colombia like lightning across the sky. Known for his cold and calculated demeanor, Garavito was detained in an investigation that forever changed the lives of thousands of Colombians. What followed was an even greater nightmare. During interrogations, Garavito showed no remorse. On the contrary, he spoke of his crimes with a chilling calm, as though recounting a simple story. His confession was horrifying, as he detailed without pity how he lured each of his victims, how he tortured them, and how he ultimately took their lives. He even claimed that the number of victims might be higher, as he only remembered the details of specific crimes. The Beast's Trial. During the trial, Garavito's face betrayed no sign of remorse. Before his victims and their families, he remained unshaken, like a beast incapable of understanding the suffering of others. He was sentenced to 1,853 years in prison, a number that, though imposing, was known to be reducible under Colombian laws that allowed certain benefits for cooperation with the authorities. The monster who had terrorized the nation for years was now behind bars, but the lingering sense that evil could never truly be vanquished hung heavy in the air. Garavito was not just a murderer, he was a predator who embodied absolute evil. Each life he took became a deep scar on Colombia's soul. The legacy of evil. Luis Alfredo Garavito, the Beast, is more than a criminal. He is a symbol of the deepest darkness within humanity. His story serves as a chilling reminder of the fragility of childhood and how evil can take on forms so terrifying that they remain unrecognized until it is too late. Despite his capture and conviction, Garavito remains a figure studied in criminology, not only for the magnitude of his crimes but for the profoundly disturbing nature of his psychopathy. In Colombia, the name the Beast resonates as an eternal warning. Evil can hide anywhere, in any form, and even the most ordinary-seeming person can harbor the darkest abyss within. Today, Garavito remains in prison, condemned for his crimes. But the shadow of his name will never fade. In the hearts of his victims and in the collective memory of the nation, the Beast will live on as a grim reminder that absolute evil can walk among us, waiting for the right moment to strike.